From the moment they laid eyes on each other in the Tournament of Power, Dragon Ball fans have asked an age-old question. Is Caulifla the Universe 6 version of Goku? Kale is obviously the Universe 6 version of Broly, and Cabba is theorized to be the Universe 6 version of Tarble based off of his connection to Vegeta, his appearance, and his similar design to Tarble. In fact, fans along with myself essentially substitute Cabba as a replacement for Tarble since Tarble never showed up in Dragon Ball Super himself. And of course we also have Frost, who is clearly the Universe 6 twin of Frieza, while Beerus and Champa are brothers, which started the whole parallel twin theory complex. But what would make fans think that Caulifla is the Universe 6 version of Goku in the first place? So the first thing we must discuss is the childlike excitement that Caulifla and Goku both possess. When you look at Goku and Caulifla specifically, you can say that they're clearly both Saiyans that have a natural instinct to want to fight and be in battle, which is something all Saiyans share. And throughout the Tournament of Power, this is something that was mostly on Caulifla's side, as Goku was demonstrating multiple transformations throughout the arc, and as you can see, while this was happening, Caulifla was excited to ask Goku questions and to learn more about the depths of Super Saiyan transformations, because when we go back to what we learned from Universe 6, Cabba was essentially the first Super Saiyan in the history of Universe 6 Saiyans, because when he was fighting against Vegeta in the Universe 6 tournament, he was shocked to even know that Super Saiyan had existed. So when Caulifla sees Goku transforming into all of these different forms, she completely wilds out. And when we look at Goku's childlike excitement, a perfect example to illustrate this would be when we go back to the Android arc. And to be specific, when Goku was first learning about Cell, he was asked a question of whether or not he was afraid or if he was excited. And Goku said both. And that is a perfect example to illustrate how Goku feels. Even if he's fighting against a foe that's significantly more powerful or potentially more powerful, Goku has such a desire to want to fight him, and this goes back to Goku's childlike excitement for fighting. Because more than any other character in Dragon Ball, Goku is effectively a man-child in the Dragon Ball universe. He's a kid trapped in an adult's body, and there's numerous examples that we could give even going back to the original Dragon Ball to show this, and a very innocent example of Goku illustrating his man-childness would be when he sees Bulma in the Changes episode after he hadn't seen her in years. And Goku basically asks if there was blood on Bulma's lip because he didn't even understand that Bulma was wearing lipstick, which illustrates that not only did Goku grow up in the middle of nowhere, so his social skills were basically substandard, but Goku maintains that childlike desire to continue fighting and not really doing anything else in his life. And when we compare this to Caulifla, who's essentially a young punk that runs a gang in both the anime and the manga, you can see that she, even as we would see she's clearly a young adult, maintains a very juvenile, childlike vision of how she wants to conduct herself. So we can say with confidence that Caulifla and Goku both have a strong childlike excitement for fighting and behavior. And to further emphasize the playfulness of Caulifla, let's not forget what happens when she fuses into Kefla, who is basically the Universe 6 version of Vegito. Kefla is just Caulifla with a major power-up, and this is very similar to what we saw when Gotenks was born, when Gotenks is essentially just Kid Trunks with a major power-up, and in the case of Vegito specifically, his playfulness is clearly more linked to Goku than it is Vegeta, which once again further emphasizes the comparisons between Caulifla and Goku. Now in terms of appearance, of course you guys can make the argument that Caulifla's obviously not Goku because she doesn't really look like Goku, but clearly when we look at Kale in her base form, she definitely has inspiration off of Broly's original design, just simply based off of the clothes that she's wearing, and when she transforms, it couldn't have been more obvious that she basically is the original Broly with just lipstick in the anime adaptation. Whereas in the manga adaptation, her legendary or berserk Super Saiyan form was different, where she had a more slender type of body build. And she never gained the ability to fully control it, which is something that's different between the manga and the anime, but that's besides the point. Caulifla and Goku don't really look alike. They have a completely different hairstyle, a completely different appearance, and as a result of that, that is an argument for you guys to say that if the show writers wanted to make it obvious that Caulifla was based off of Goku, they would have made her look more like Goku. But another key point of contention is the fact that Caulifla is effectively a criminal and a quote-unquote bad guy, whereas Goku is a quote-unquote good guy. But the thing that you also have to understand is that Goku is a good guy by circumstance. Because Goku hit his head when he was a baby, if we're going with the original, Dragon Ball continuity as to why Goku became a good guy, even though Minus and Dragon Ball Super kind of rewrote some things. But the point that we're trying to get at here is, when you compare that major difference, Goku was supposed to be a bad Saiyan, but there were external causes, such as the influence of Grandpa Gohan combined with him hitting his head, that made him the character that he was. So, the truth is really, what kind of character would Goku have been naturally had he not ended up on Earth and had all of those influences that completely morphed and changed his character into the being that we saw later on in Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball Super? And the best example to illustrate what Goku would have been the character of Turles, because Turles is effectively an evil version of Goku and what Goku would have been like had he never hit his head. And it really goes to show what Caulifla's true nature actually is, because she comes from a planet where Saiyans are more righteous in that specific universe, but yet she still is a bandit and chooses to do crime. Which goes to show that the nature of the characters could have been similar had circumstances been different for Goku. But one thing that has been made clear about Caulifla and Goku, where this really began in the first place, is the natural connection that they have. Goku and Caulifla were fighting each other in a tournament of power to literally erase each other from existence, but Goku goes out of his way to spend valuable fighting time to explain things to her and essentially kind of give her like a master-student lesson throughout the Tournament of Power, even though they are enemies. And when you look at this, and you look at the fact that Caulifla feels a mutual connection towards Goku when she first sees Goku, when they were fighting against each other, you can see that they naturally had a click that made fans alert to this. And this connection was made even more powerful because the connection was so strong that Kale basically raged out and transformed into Tournament of Power because she got angry at Goku, and the way that they interacted throughout the Tournament of Power, where Goku was selective when he decided to fight against her, when there was moments where he could have just completely taken her out in the battle against the Pride Troopers. Caulifla basically just leaves with the knocked out Kale, and in that moment Goku could have wiped her out, but he chose not to, and he went and fought against other characters, which shows that because of their Saiyan connection, combined with the fact that they just naturally clicked, it appears as if Goku was seeing a mirror of himself when he met Caulifla for the first time. But when we move on from this, guys, we have a major contrast between how Caulifla and Goku fight. Caulifla is a prodigy of all prodigies, to the point where fans essentially called her the Rey Skywalker from the Star Wars franchise and Dragon Ball Super, and a Mary Sue of all sorts, because Caulifla accomplished things that took characters years worth of training and mastering just by figuring out a tingly sensation in her back, which is probably giving some Dragon Ball fans pretty horrible memories because the community wasn't very happy when this originally came out. But apart from Goku, Caulifla didn't really have to go through the death of one of her close friends to become a Super Saiyan. She didn't have to go into the Room of Spirit and Time or die and go to the afterlife to have less stress on her body to push herself into all of these great transformations. She just did it because the plot just wanted her to do it so that she was strong enough to compete against stronger characters in the Tournament of Power, and because of this, she would be the greatest female prodigy in Dragon Ball history if a character like Kale didn't exist. But even when compared to Kale, Caulifla's clearly a better and more gifted fighter, but in Kale's case, she just has more latent abilities. So in a weird way, when you look at Caulifla and Kale, it's kind of like a mirror of seeing Goku and Gohan, where Gohan has all of this latent ability and Goku's a more natural fighter, and when Gohan actually learns how to control that power within him, it actually makes him a significantly more dangerous foe, which is what we see with Broly in Dragon Ball Super Hero, where we see Broly training to fight in a more controlled manner. But in Goku's case, he never had any of this. He was always the underdog Saiyan, and had it not been for the plot creating Zenkai-Boos and Goku going into the afterlife to train with King Kai and do all of these other things, he would have been significantly weaker than pretty much almost every Saiyan that we've seen throughout Dragon Ball history. But because of the way that the story's written, Goku is the underdog that just keeps proving everybody wrong over and over again. And if matters couldn't prove Goku was an underdog more than anything else, just look at the fact that he was sent to Earth in the original writing of Dragon Ball because of the fact that Earth was a weak planet. And when we look at the fact that he was born with a power level of 2, it just goes to show you that Goku was not supposed to amount to much. And because of this, we have a powerful dynamic to which we can compare how Caulifla and Goku fight and improve throughout Dragon Ball history. Now, in terms of the direction of the show, guys, it would have been a lot more clear to us as Dragon Ball fans if Caulifla was really meant to be the Universe 6 version of Goku, because one thing that Dragon Ball does is, if things are supposed to be obvious, they will be made obvious. If we go back to the original Dragon Ball, Toriyama clearly looked at Appa and Boro with a Native American inspiration. And when you look at a character like Nam, he was clearly meant to have an Indian inspiration. And when we look at Staff Officer Black, I mean, you couldn't have been a little bit more obvious than this. Which is why when the topic of what Oob is comes up, that's another conversation for another day, but you'd have to know a little bit more about Japanese culture to understand where Oob comes from specifically, and I promise you that will be answered in a future video. So all of this is to say that if Caulifla was supposed to be Goku, it would have been a little bit more clear than fans just coming up with a cool theory to explain all of this, which leads us to our ultimate point. If you think a little too deep about this, guys, you will enter a deep rabbit hole where you will start thinking of some similarities and some differences between characters to go and comparing, well, what is the Universe 6 version of Bulma? What is the Universe 6 version of Vegeta? Now, we still have not gotten a chance to meet the king of Planet Sadala yet, which would probably be, if we were to guess, potentially either the Universe 6 version of King Vegeta or Prince Vegeta, depending on how the writing changed things, and because of the fact that Saiyans don't have tails and their society developed differently, there would clearly be some differences there, which is one of the reasons why it would be really interesting if Super returned, so we could actually have an interesting storyline about that, and see Goku and Vegeta meeting a completely different type of Saiyan culture. But apart from that, guys, these Universe 6, Universe 7 counterpart theories can really take you into a deep rabbit hole, but that's one of the reasons why it's fun to discuss this on YouTube.